I got to tell you, though, Citizens Bank Park, there is like just so many food and drink options there. It is unbelievable how far that place has come. Now, the place was great when it opened. You could just order whatever you want there. It is nuts how many food and drink options are there. Bob Wankel, Crossing Broad, RedOctoberPhilly.com as the Phillies hit the All-Star break. 62 wins, best in baseball. But, man, this weekend was not indicative of the first half that they have. It goes all the way back to Friday night. Didn't have it Friday. And yesterday was maybe one of the least enjoyable sporting events I've ever been to in my life.
That's setting quite the stage here. It was a rough one. I covered the game yesterday. I was in the air conditioning in the press box, and it was still pretty miserable, Mike. So I don't know what it was like in section 137,
Awful.
But it could not have been good. I would have to agree with that.
It was not good.
It felt like yesterday to me, that game pretty early on. They had a light bullpen. They were down a few guys. They fall behind in the fourth, and it just sort of felt like the All-Star break began around 2:30 yesterday.
Yeah. People would forget, they actually had a lead in the game yesterday, and then it's 7-1. They did score 2 runs on that throw. They misses the cutoff man, and they end up scoring like a little league run there, and it's 7-3. You're feeling like maybe, and then home run derby. Let me ask you a couple quick things here. What was the decision to start Kerkering yesterday? I was a little, when I got there and I saw he was pitching, why not start Mercado, see how many he can get? What was the reason for Kerkering?
I think that the idea is just that you look at how Michael Mercado came out and started the game against the Braves last time out, and he really struggled right from the jump. He got through the first inning, but his command was so bad that I think they wanted to kind of create some comfort for him and say, look, let's change the mentality. You're not going to prep like a starter, even though you're going to throw the bulk of innings. You're going to have that reliever mentality just to kind of give him a little bit of a different feel, see if they could get him through a few innings. And as we come to find out, it didn't really matter, but I think that was part of the thought process.
I would imagine that's the last we see of Michael Mercado.
I think that's probably the last you see of Michael Mercado, at least in the short term. I do think if there's a world where they say, you know what, we're going to stick with him for now, I think they have to change the way that they approach it. They're trying to get multiple innings out of him. Thought it was pretty clear that he was max effort, and by the third inning that he was out there, he got to the fifth, and he was totally cooked at that point. It was quite clear. So I think he's got a good arm. He's been productive both in spring training and minor leagues. If you want to stick it out with him, I think you have to turn him back into a single inning guy for the time being. But I am with you. I think that he's probably headed for a trip back down.
When you coached, did you see Tyler Phillips ever in person?
I did. So we played Bishop Eustace a couple times. We did not face him directly, but I saw him in 2015 in a non-public sectional game. It was Gloucester Catholic and Bishop Eustace, and he won 2-1. He beat Gloucester Catholic. They threw a guy named John Murphy that day who was like really highly touted, ended up at Maryland, but Phillips was just a little bit better than him. So, yeah.
Obviously he throws, well. He has the day where he strikes out a bunch of guys. I mean, was a guy who's been bouncing around, but is he a guy that can be something in the bullpen for this team?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you get your guys back like Walker Turnbull, he gets bumped out of the rotation presumably, and can he stick around and be a multi-inning reliever, a long man of sorts, or a swing man? I think that maybe that is there. He's certainly shown some promise in these first 2 appearances, and he's going to get another crack at it in Pittsburgh. But you don't want to jump to conclusions one way or the other. He certainly looks like he belongs right now, but is he long for key innings for this team? But probably not. But I do think that there could be a role for him here, especially with a guy like Mercado struggling. So, I mean, part of it is that you look at what Ruiz did yesterday. You look at what Dominguez is doing right now, it's a different story. He's in a different class, a different category, but it's not like all of these guys are just, firing at full cylinder right now. So, I mean, maybe there's a little bit more than that for him.
Yeah. No, and just because, as you hinted at the 2 guys, Turnbull and Walker, if they're out after the All-Star break, we know Turnbull will be. We'll see what happens with Walker. But is he a guy that they can keep throwing out there every 5th day in that number 5 spot? And if he performs, is he the guy that kind of goes to that bullpen? Speaking of the bullpen, Friday night you saw Mason Miller cracking the gun at 104, And obviously that just lights up everybody's eyes, but he's got a little attitude to him too. I mean, the umpire misses a call and he kind of gives the point like, you missed that strike, give me the ball, I'll throw 104 so you catch this one maybe. But, when you watch him and obviously Rooker over the weekend, the fact that he hits 2 blasts yesterday, but he had an awesome weekend. You tweeted out, I think the asking price went up. That was after the first home run. After he hit another home run, I guess those are 2 guys you really, if you're Dave Dombrowski, have to consider.
Well, I think on the first piece, I mean, if they're going to add a bullpen arm, you would think it would be a difference maker because they have some high upside guys already. So if you're not going to go out and get a dude, I put that in air quotes there, but if you're not going to go get a dude, then what's even the point of adding to the bullpen mix? I think you need another. If you're going to invest in that, go get a guy that you really feel like is going to make a true difference. That being said, Miller's cost is going to be through the roof. I mean, I just don't know that the Phillies are going to entertain or participate in conversations with the cost that it would require from a prospect perspective to make that deal. With Brent Rooker, you see the weekend that he had, and he's a really nice hitter, and he's having a very good season. The problem there is that he has not played a defensive inning since May 30th. I mean, think about this. This is an A's team that is going to clearly sell, probably would like to drive up the value of Brent Rooker, and they're not putting him out there defensively. What does that say to you? I mean, he's played 14 games all season defensively, 5 in right field and 9 in left. And I just don't know if the Phillies want to trade for a DH type that's basically only going to platoon. And by the way, again, what's that going to cost? Because it's probably going to be pretty steep. So both would be great additions, but I just don't know if those are the guys for the Phillies.
Well, that's the question. Would you, is Dave Dombrowski willing to sacrifice some defense to get that right-handed bat and play him 6 or 7 innings and then replace him?
I don't think they want to do that. I mean, I think they would rather not go back down that road where they were at with Kyle Schwarber, where you were sacrificing defense to get the offense on the field. And I think that they would have liked to have turned the page on the defensive liability in left field. Now, that being said, we'll see what happens with the market. If there's no better option and they're that desperate to get the offense, maybe then they would be a little bit more willing to deal with it, and maybe they stick Brent Rooker out there if they wanted to make that deal and kind of let him just hope that he catches the ones that are hit to him. But I don't think it's an ideal fit. But if he's going to hit like that, fine.
Well, because I would ask you then, Bob, if you had that bat in your lineup, where's he hitting on this team? 4, 5?
I suppose he probably protects Harper. So I would say 4, and then you can slot Bohm back. I mean, I know Bohm's been a doubles machine. He's on pace for 56 doubles this season. I wrote yesterday, he's only 3 off. His pacing is 3 off the franchise record for doubles in a season set by Chuck Klein back in 1930. So I'm not chomping at the bit to get Alec Bohm out of the 4-hole, as productive as he's been. But, yeah, man, that would really lengthen this thing out a little bit.
Yeah, you put Rooker, I was saying this in the first hour. You put him in the 4-hole, you put Bohm in the 5-hole, and then when Real Muto's back, you probably can hit him 6 or Stott 6. Now, I know you wrote about Stott and Castellanos, and we can get into that a little bit here. But you put Real Muto in the 6th spot, Bohm or Stott 7. I mean, Castellanos 7 or 8. You know what I mean? You're talking about a pretty deep lineup. You're hitting Stott 5 right now.
Yeah, they got to get Stott out of the middle of the lineup. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. I mean, I am still high on Bryson Stott. I think that he's a quality hitter. I acknowledge that his walk rate has more than doubled this season. He's been more patient, more selective. I think maybe at the expense of some of his hit skill. But you cannot, with the way that Bryson Stott's going right now, continue to hit him 5th or 6th in a lineup and expect to be productive and consistent every single night.
Well, where do you put Real Muto? Where do you put? He's supposed to come back in Minnesota. Where do you put him in?
I think that Real Muto probably slots back to 5.
Because he started the season hitting 4, then he went to 2 when Turner went out. So we really haven't seen where he's going to end up in the new configuration with Bohm kind of handling 4 and Turner back. So Real Muto really hasn't had a spot with the lineup as constructed.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that they would go Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Bohm, Real Muto, probably Stott 6th, and then Castellanos 7th, and then whatever you want to do. And then Brandon Marsh is in the lineup. Maybe Marsh comes in and hits 6th. But I mean, Bryson Stott, I wrote this. He right now, since May 19th, of all qualified major league second basemen, has the second worst batting average of any qualified second baseman from that time period. We're talking about almost 2 months. His OPS is 20th out of 21 qualified second baseman. I mean, we're getting to a point now where I have a lot of faith in the player. I like the guy. I think that he's going to be a good player when it's all said and done. But he's going through it right now, and they gotta get him out of the middle of that lineup.
Why do you feel that he has struggled so much? Is there anything that stands out? Because this was a guy that seemingly the arrow was pointing up. He looked like a confident player last year. Hits that grand slam, of course, in the playoff game, hitting in the 5-hole primarily, from what I recall. Last year at playoffs, he was pretty much the 5 spot on this. What has happened that you're right? I mean, some of the numbers are glaring.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, we're at the All-Star break here. He walked 39 times last season. He already has 40 walks this season, so I give him credit for that. I mean, he really is basically on pace to double his walks year over year. A little bit less than that now. He's not walking as much these past couple of weeks as he was, but for a time, he was essentially on pace to double his walk rate. Good. You know, that shows development. That shows progress, more selectivity, better eye. I think, though, in doing so, seeing more pitches, running counts deeper, what has happened is you do sacrifice a little bit of aggressiveness. You know, one thing I'll say is that progress is not always linear. You see a young player have some success and you expect them to just build on it. But sometimes they take a step back. Sometimes they take 2 steps back before the light goes on and you get the finished product. And I think with Bryson Stott right now, you're seeing a guy that's cognizant of wanting to see more pitches, draw more walks so that he can kind of profile more as an on-base guy, top of the order guy. But in doing so, I think some of that aggressiveness has led to his struggles. And, you know, I think that when it's all said and done, he puts it all together, but he's going through it right now. And that's what I see.
He's going through it. What about Castellanos? Is he going the opposite? Do we feel better that he has turned a corner? I don't know that anyone's ever going to be like, hey, I trust that guy or I feel confident in that guy. But has he been giving you better at bats?
Well, he has. And I mean, it's not always pretty. And it wasn't pretty yesterday. And that's
no,
the thing.
It wasn't.
You say, I don't think people will ever trust him. I hear you on that. I mean, you know, what happened in the postseason last year at the end, the way that this year started. I mean, I think that there's a lot of ugly at bats. There's a lot of at bats where they feel a little bit non-competitive. But at the same time, if you go back to that May 19th, which is the date that I circled in the story, you're talking about a guy who's had an OPS in the high 700s. He's been pretty productive since then. I mean, he's slashing 272, 318, and 504 since the 3rd week of May. I mean, that's pretty good. You would take that over the course of 162. You'd say, like, all right, this guy's basically going to have an 800 OPS, hit about 25 homers. I'll sign up for that. That start was so bad, though, that it just deflates his overall numbers.
Yeah. Bob Wankel, RedOctoberPhilly.com is the newsletter. Crossing Broad, of course, check out all the Phillies coverage over there. Phillies at the All-Star break, so much to kind of look at. As you saw Rooker in town this weekend, he hits the 2 homers, Miller the other night. Obviously, the trade stuff is going to continue to be they got 15 days to make a decision here on what they want to do. You said Friday, this team right now, as constructed, probably not good enough to win. I mean, yeah, could they do it? Sure. But they probably need to do something else. But I want to throw into, how worried are you about the pitching? Suarez and all that, some of these little minor back stuff is not good, but hearing the injury stuff, and as good as they were in the first half of the season, to have to try to replicate or come close to that.
Yeah, I think that the last start by Ranger Suarez was a little bit concerning. You know, guys are not going to be sharp every time out. They're going to hit little 2-3 start runs where they don't have everything firing. But, I mean, yeah, the velocity is a concern. The velocity was down. He's a guy that doesn't throw all that hard to begin with, so it really does matter. You know, when you're firing away at 89, 90, like that's not a great sign for Ranger Suarez. I thought that some of the command was not as crisp as it usually is. So, yeah, you're looking at a stretch now for about a month, maybe a little shy of a month, where he has not been great. And, you know, you hear that he's got some some back issues going on, and they're going to give him some extended rest here. So you won't see him in Pittsburgh. You won't see him until the Minnesota series. So you hope that that extended time off, the All-Star break, allows them to realign the rotation and that he kind of comes back and is the guy that you saw for the bulk of the first half. I'm not personally concerned about Zach Wheeler. I feel very good about Aaron Nola. And it's hard not to feel good about Christopher Sanchez still. I know everybody's like waiting for the other shoe to drop or waiting for that regression with him. But every time that he has struggled this season, he's come back and he's been fantastic in the follow-up start. And I think there's something to be said for that. So I feel overall pretty good about it, but they certainly need to. I mean, Ranger Suarez is sort of the key. He's the guy that you're like, hey, we have three aces. You know, we have three guys that we feel like can shut you down from the first pitch to the final pitch every time they take the ball. And right now, he's not that guy. So there's got to be a little bit of worry that's crept in there. But I think overall, the Phillies are still in a really good spot. I still would not be surprised, though, if they added another starter. I know that sounds crazy, especially with Turnbull and Walker looming, but there's enough, and I may have said this last week, I apologize if this is redundant, but I think there is enough uncertainty in the back part of the rotation with these back issues and workload issues that it wouldn't be a terrible idea to go out and try to find another number 5 type starter who can fill innings, and if you want to go to a 6-man rotation, would allow you to do that.
Yeah, we got a lot of questions that still need to be answered. If you could pick Rooker or Miller, which one would you take?
I would take Miller. I just think what you do then is you effectively end the game. You effectively end the game after the 5th inning. Like if your starting pitching, which is so good, continues to be so good, and you get that bullpen a lead with the Hoffmans and the Stroms, and even the Kirkerings of the world, and then you can back that up with Miller. I mean, those are 4 innings where the opponent says, oh, man, we really have an uphill battle here.
It's like a, what was that, the 15 Royals? I mean, you got to their bullpen, and the game was over.
Yeah.
We're comparing the Phillies to the Royals, though. How about that?
That's one of the things, though, that's interesting, right? Like, when you look at that A's team, they're not very good. They're, 25 games under 500, but when they get a lead late, they have a pretty decent setup guy, and then Miller. That's tough.
Yeah, no, their bullpen is pretty solid. They got a couple interesting guys back there, but Miller, the exorbitant amount that you would have to give up to get one or both of those guys. You're probably thinking if you're Dave Dombrowski, I just don't know that I'm willing to do that for a guy that just defensively is a nothing burger.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
They have a lot of decisions to make here. I would be, if you gave me the over-under of 2.5 moves, I would take the over. I think that they're going to make 3 moves, and I think one is going to be one of significance where you say, wow, okay, great. But to predict that is very difficult, and I don't want to dodge the question or dodge the projection, but so much of it will be predicated upon who becomes available. How willing are the other side of the deal? How willing are they to be to part ways? What are their asks? I think that the Phillies will be opportunistic and go to where the value is.
All right, here's a question for you then, all right? Is there a guy that's in the regular lineup, platoon, and or the rotation that they use to trade? Or is the trade that they make coming from prospects?
I don't think that they will trade a guy that is in the normal lineup or, we'll call him a platoon piece like Brandon Marsh. I think you can make an argument for it.
Like the guys who would not be traded, period, would be probably Real Muto, Harper, Turner, Schwarber. I would imagine Bohm.
You're not trading out, but this team is on pace to win over 100 games. Like, I just don't see them coming in and doing, like, if you had an underachieving team, like let's say that you had a few all-stars and you like these guys, but the Phillies, we're only 6 games over 500 right now. Maybe the conversation would be, maybe they make another second half run. They've made some deep postseason runs the past couple of years, but maybe this team just isn't good enough. So let's do something that's going to hurt a little bit to get to where we want to go. And maybe you would trade one of these core guys. I just don't think that you're taking a team that's on pace to win over 100 games and has the chemistry that they do and subtracting from it. But could you make an argument, and I have previously, about like a Bryson Stott or a Brandon Marsh? Like those guys would be of interest to another team, even a rebuilding team that wants a younger player that's under control, that is major league ready and isn't a total project or a total projection. But I just can't see the Phillies doing that.
All right, Phil, start the second half this weekend. And, of course, the All-Star game tomorrow. You got 3 starters. You got Turner hitting third, Harper hitting fourth, and Alec Boehm hitting 7th tomorrow night in the All-Star lineup. And Alec Boehm will participate in the Home Run Derby tonight. You can listen to the All-Star game and the Derby right here on 97.3 ESPN. Bob Wankel, RedOctoberPhilly.com is the newsletter. And don't forget all their coverage over at It was a hot one yesterday. It was a hot one yesterday.
Hydrate.
Thank you, man. Bob Wankel, everybody, here on the Sports Bash. 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.